more thing.
Why not? Go. Go. Pronto.
Okay.
Honorable members, honorable members, honorable members, the President.
While standing, a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. You can take your seats. Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. We are sorry that we are starting slightly late from the scheduled time. It was mainly because of organization of the work. I understand there is no interpretation. Interpretation.
Yes, Mr. President, is coming through. Yes, available, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, yes.
See. Shukran, asante sana. I was apologizing. I said sorry for the confusion and late starting. It was more to do with logistical arrangements. I want to start by apologizing what happened in the morning, this morning. Some caucuses did not, caucuses or individuals did not get the message, like Southern Caucus, Western Caucus, did not get the message that the plenary that was scheduled for 9 a.m. had been moved to 2 p.m. So they came this morning. I want to apologize for that. It was again an issue of communication, which was poor. And then, of course, in the afternoon, I was summoned by the caucus chairpersons who were meeting to try and agree how we move forward. And moving forward means we come in the chamber. So the purpose for meeting this afternoon is to hear from the regions, clause by clause, which clauses we are agreeing. Agreeing means with all of us agree that no need to amend is agreeing. Or we amend by going in this direction, but we all agree that's another agreement. or in some cases, we don't agree. So we need to design a methodology which will enable us to move very fast. Which is once the first region says on this clause, we are of this view. Then the second clause, the second region says, is it the same? Or they say, no, we have a different view and our view is this quickly. The third one says, okay, we are of this view or this view. Right, we hear the commonalities and the differences. The spirit of this work, honorable members, is not for this chamber to be taken back to 2021 in May and June. We are, as much as possible, avoiding that type of chamber. So where we see that we are differing, the moment we say debate, and the press, the media is here, it will be back in New York within minutes that those people have started. They've been telling the world that they are now going to show unity. So, and the way we debate differs. I think you will all agree with me and with the Bureau here that the spirit that we want is a spirit of cordiality, spirit of amicable settlement, spirit of negotiating solutions. So where we don't agree, we'll pack that clause and say, this one seems we don't agree. We leave it, go to those, all the clauses that we agree. And we ask the drafters to start drafting because we agreed. We remain with those that we seem not to be agreeing. And we give chance to the caucuses and the caucus leadership to sit and say, why are we disagreeing? Why are we disagreeing? That's a better strategy. And that's how nations are run and the continents are run. So we proceed with caucuses. I see the names here, the caucus have been put in alphabetical order. And in all cases, I see we start with Central Caucus, Eastern Caucus, Northern Caucus, Southern, Western. I'll take my seat as I call on the Central Caucus to take us. I think it's easier to talk of the 2-3 first clauses. What is a caucus you have recommended? Thank you. And in order to save time, they will come too many times here. If you speak from there, it will be much faster for us. Thank you.
On a point of order, Honorable President, can I rise on a point of order, please?
Thank you. Supposed to give me my documents. Sorry, proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable President, Honorable Vice President, Honorable colleagues from all regions. Honorable President, may I make an intervention on what you have said that regions must report on what they are agreeing and not agreeing on. Can we be allowed as regional chairpersons to present the reports of our regions as discussed by the regions? Just table the reports over there in that podium, table reports as they are. Any other thing will be on step number 2. But step number 1, as we have agreed also in the meeting where we are coming from, is that we are going to table our reports as they are. Whether we agree or we don't agree, then those who are listening and those who are capturing will know that we are not agreeing on this, we are agreeing on this. But it cannot be for us now to be able to identify areas of agreement and areas of disagreement. I saw submit, Honorable President. Thank you.
I think it's a good proposal, which means they will just read their reports. And as they read, of course, there's cross-reference. It means you need to remember what this region said on clause 1. And on clause 2, I believe you have something to write on that can help also. That I agree with that approach. It's actually faster. So we start with the central region. Central region, yes. Yes, you come over because now it's a report.
Honorable President,
Honorable President, Honorable Vice President, honorable members, and dear colleagues. I will not get in a few things like introductions. I will go straight to the presentation of the work which we had in our caucus of Central Africa. We held work sessions on the 24th and the 25th of October. As you all know, the Bureau or the Secretariat, the General Secretariat, has provided us with working documents containing the amendments that have been proposed to be introduced into the rules of procedure. And you have certainly, dear colleagues, with you copies of the documents of the basic texts of the Pan-African Parliament, basic documents of the Pan-African Parliament. The caucus of Central Africa has started its work on the 24th and 25th. The Committee on the Rules has put forward to us 17 amendments, and you will see in our report that we went beyond the 17 amendments because when we received the programs for the activities of this session, the caucus agreed, or members of the caucus agreed, that we should work on the items of amendments of the rules of procedure, meaning that there was a prior work which was done by members of each country and which we adopted as a work of our own caucus. Here are the proposals which have been made by our Central Africa caucus on the rules of procedure. And here we will start with the table of contents, which we would suggest be defined as a table of contents. Rule 1, that is definitions. Here are our proposals. When we look at the rules of procedure, there are some definitions that are missing, so we suggest the terms which should be incorporated into Rule 1 of the definitions. The Conference of Presidents, of Speakers, the regional caucuses, the regional caucuses, the deliberative organ, the proposal of laws or draft laws, the clerk, and the deputy clerk. As concerns the two terms, that is, the regional caucuses and regional groups, we do use the two terms And we have to choose either regional group or regional caucus in French. And we also suggested that it is necessary to redefine the terms of a bailiff. We must find another phrase in French. The bailiff is not in charge of maintaining order, but he is a member of the Secretariat who is in charge of circulating documents in the work within committees or in the plenary. Rule 2, seat of the Parliament. The caucus proposes the seat could be transferred, and this is an amendment, to any member state on the request of the two-thirds of the members of the Pan-African Parliament. This is an option that we are suggesting, if possible, that is a transfer if ever there is a request. Rule 3, organs of the Pan-African Parliament. We propose that we add to the organs of the Pan-African Parliament the Conference of Speakers, the regional caucuses, that is in addition to the permanent committees and the Bureau. Rule 4, functions of the Parliament. As you know, honorable members, dear colleagues, the Pan-African Parliament is sometimes, if not always, whenever elections are held on our continent, is called to carry out missions of observation of the elections. So we would like to add this mission of observations of elections as part of the functions. Rule 7, capacity and term of the parliamentarians. This amendment was not accepted by the caucus because this rule does not refer to the post, and so the amendment was rejected. Rule 8, vacancy of seats. Rule 8C, we propose an addition of words on the physical capacity or the mental state. And we have added the phrase duly noted or consulted by a medical doctor in order to know there are any physical incapacity for a parliamentarian to carry out his or her functions. So we suggest that we remove item D or bullet D. In G, we suggest to add or designate at the end. So the situation of members in the case of with the withdrawal of the state from the African Union, of the state which has designated or appointed, and here we're talking about the deliberating organ who has designated the member. Article or Rule 9, that is the taking of the oath.
Amendment proposed.
The amendment which has been suggested by our Rules and Procedure Committee was rejected, but there is a possibility, maybe the possibility of taking the oath during the session of the permanent committees. Why? Because if somebody, for example, we are here at the moment, for example, we are here physically, we are here during this October session. If there are elections, and somebody who has been elected after May, we need to wait until October or May to be able to become a member of the Pan-African Parliament. That is what we would like to propose, if there is a possibility of doing it, if the plenary would agree to have other sessions where we could in fact take the oath, because we do have 4 sessions a year. Rule 10. Rule 10, a recommendation. All we have here is a recommendation. On this particular rule, we have not proposed an amendment, but there is a recommendation on Rule 10 on the formulation of the privileges in 4, 5, and 6. This is the article that deals with privileges and immunities of the members of the Pan-African Parliament. There are members who, for example, do not have a diplomatic passport. This is why we insist, in fact, on these passports of the African Union and diplomatic passport, because we've got colleagues, for example, in our caucus who've had problems getting a visa to be able to participate. Sometimes what happens is they give you a visa which is a single entry. Sometimes we are given a visa for 10 days or for 14 days. So there is a need to allow our colleagues to be able to take part in all the sessions of the Pan-African Parliament, all the working sessions, to have diplomatic passports. Well, problem is what? We've got colleagues, for example, we are here, who should go to a meeting. For example, they should go to COP27. But after the meetings of COP27, for example, we've got working sessions which are continuing here. But given that the honourable members have visas which is only for a single entry, will unfortunately not be given the possibility of re-entering South Africa. We know how much time it takes to have a visa. So we would like to insist on the issue of the diplomatic passport, and also to do with badges and passes and everything that is needed to be identified as a member of the African Parliament. Rule 11, which is the waiver of immunity, we would like to add to sub-rule 3 that the Commission of Rules and Procedures should, in fact, have spoken about this already, but what we would like to suggest is that the Commission of Rules and Procedures should submit its report during plenary to be debated and adopted. Rule 13, to do with the Code of Conduct. We are in absolute agreement that we should have a Code of Conduct which would be drafted by our committee, but we have added to this article that it should be adopted in plenary and then should be integrated in the rules of procedure, because we haven't seen whether there is a need, for example, to have a separate document. So we feel that after the adoption of the Code of Conduct, it should then be included in our rules of procedure. Rule 14, which deals with the Bureau of Parliament. The Bureau of the Parliament is composed of a president and 4 vice presidents. The election of the members of the Bureau is done on the principle of rotation amongst the 5 regions. I think that we've just raised the issue of what happened in May 21, and it was based, in fact, of what happened, because it was, of course, based with rotation. We had issues around that. We've already had the elections for the new bureau. We have accepted all the principles. We have accepted the principle of rotation. We need to integrate it into the rules of procedure of the Pan-African Parliament. But if we accept the principle of rotation, I think that in 2021, the problems were not that people were against the rotation. Where there was a debate is that we only apply rotation because we haven't ratified yet our protocol, our new protocol. But since we've now accepted it, we need to integrate it into our rules of procedure of the Pan-African Parliament. Sub-rule 11, we have, for example, in the event of a vacancy of an office during the term of office, a member of an organ of the PAP, the member elected in replacement, shall complete the term of his or her predecessor, and that we are in agreement with. The amendment which we would like to add to this sub-rule 11 of Rule 16 is that in the event of a vacancy due to elections in the member state of the country, the members of the Bureau, for example, replace the regional region. So in fact, the person could be replaced by a member of the Bureau until the end of the electoral process. If the member is re-elected and is designated once again by his or her national parliament or by another deliberating organ, then he will or she will retake her post at the Bureau or the regional groups, because we've already accepted the principle of rotation amongst our 5 regions which constitute our continent or the Pan-African Parliament. Article 17, which talks about the functions of the Bureau, we would like to suggest that sub-rule G should be amended to include the provision asking that permanent committees be part of the process of the drafting of the budget before it is subjected to the plenary for adoption. When I speak about committees, about permanent committees, we've got work groups, we've got caucuses, is that when there is the drafting of the budget, we need absolutely include each permanent committee and all the others. On this article, the caucus recommends that the African Union authorizes the Pan-African Parliament to mobilize the additional funds required for such programs. Honorable members of the Bureau, esteemed colleagues, I think that we've all heard the presentation of the budget of the Pan-African Parliament. We've got issues with our budget, which is why we recommend, which is why we are proposing to the Bureau that the African Union allow us to mobilize extra funds, because I think it would be possible, but we need to have the authorization of the African Union. Rule 18, functions of the President. The President shall preside over all proceedings of Parliament, except those held in permanent committees. We would like to propose that you add also the regional caucuses. B, the President will preside over all the meetings of the Bureau, and we would like to also add and the Conference of Presidents, if we agree that the Conference of Presidents becomes an organ of the Parliament. C is it's the same thing, it's the same principle, where we would add the Conference of Presidents. And then D is that we would like to move this particular sub-rule so that it's part of the functions of the conference. Yes, that is, yes.
Just for clarity in the interpretation.
Oui, honorable, je peux, honorable président?
Yes.
Honorable président, on va revenir à cette question.
We will come back to this question because there are words that we actually cannot. It is Conference of Presidents, it is certainly in Portuguese, is the same. If there is a different translation in English, I would welcome it.
On va revenir à cet article, honorable président.
We will come back to this rule because in French we do have for example, the translation for chairperson doesn't exist in French. So maybe it's the Conference of Chairpersons. The word president is used all the time in French. So there is a rule, there is in fact, which we'll discuss these meanings a little bit later. Rule 19, which were the functions of the vice presidents. We would like to propose that you need to define what the functions are for each vice president, because we did it for the president, so why not do it for each vice president? And if we could integrate it, Rule 20, which we deal with. Okay. We spoke about the Secretariat. At least in French, for example, we talk about a secretary in the administration, but we need to add the general terms, for example, when we talk about the clerk, because in English, of course, we've got secretary, which gives in French a very different idea of what the clerk is of the Pan-African Parliament. We should also add the general terms also in English, for example, after secretary, that we add clerk or deputy clerks. Sub-rule 3, after recommendation by the Bureau, the clerk, for example, after clerk, we need to actually add the word in French. We need to add the word général in order to explain that it is, in fact, the clerk. And we would like to also propose another sub-rule, which would be 3Bs, which would be with this formulation that the clerk designates, after consultation with the Bureau, the local we estimate that the Pan-African Parliament, who is going to designate the clerk, will be recruited by other members of Parliament, and in the name of the clerk, the bureaus will then be able to recruit all the international senior servants or the public servants to be able to recruit, after consultation, of course, who they should be. With the bureaus, then they should be able to designate also who the local civil servants are here, or public servants. Rule 21, the functions of the clerk. We would like to suggest a reformulation or an amendment, which is point little e, sub-rule E, that the clerk is responsible, of course, in front of the Parliament through the Bureau. That is according to Article 13, sub-rule 4 of the new protocol. We said that this isn't a problem. We certainly can integrate it because we've already got it in terms of rotation. despite the protocol not having been ratified yet. Article 22, the creation of the permanent committees. Rule 22, the amendment which we propose here by our experts. We did not accept that amendment. Why this was not retained, we've already said. We've already got 10 permanent committees and they're not working all that well. I think the first question we should ask ourselves is that all these permanent committees, and perhaps not all, they do not work well. And I think we need to know whether there is a need to recreate perhaps other committees, or should we limit ourselves to the committees that exist already, and should perhaps create subcommittees, because we've already said that we've got budget problems, we've got issues with staff. 2 committees here, for example, and one of the caucuses has as staff, as assistant staff, for example, there is only one assistant, only one person. Do we have enough members of staff who are going to help us or not? Are you going to do the recruitment? Do we have the budget to do this recruitment? These are questions that we did ask ourselves to be able to take into account what was needed. So should we add other committees, or should we limit to the committees we have, and then we create subcommittees? It is already, in fact, happening in a lot of permanent committees where you have subcommittees that exist already. The Rule 22. Sorry, the establishment of committees. We should include CAPA also. Within our rules of procedure of the Pan-African Parliament, CAPA was created by the resolution of the plenary, but it needs to appear in the rules of procedure of the Pan-African Parliament. We also proposed that apart from the function, or apart from CAPA, that all the decisions of the African Union, that there should be, and resolutions and recommendations of Pan-African Parliament should also be the responsibility of CAPA. We know very well what CAPA does. We have adopted many resolutions here, we've also proposed a lot of recommendations, but what is the situation of their implementation? So we would like for an implementation to be there. We're talking about Agenda 2063, so we feel that it is necessary for us to have an organ, and we would like to suggest CAPA to, in fact, do the follow-up and the evaluation of all these decisions which have been taken. So all the monitoring should be done as well by them. Rule 23, which is the procedure of committees, the amendment which has been proposed by the experts, was not retained. This is where we spoke, and in fact, Mr. President, we spoke about it. Now, I wanted to say that Conférence of the President in French is in fact the speakers, Mr. President. That is what it is in English. So we're referring to the speakers. So in the French version of our rules and procedure, we're going to keep to the term president. Rule 24 on the modalities of operation of committees. The sub-rule 1, a committee may establish one or more sub-permanent committees from among its members. The procedure of subcommittees will be presented then to the permanent committees to be adopted. If this is accepted, it is already foreseen for the rules of procedure but hasn't been applied yet. We would like to create subcommittees, which then they will too have a bureau, but their work needs to be presented during the plenary to their respective permanent committees. The procedure of subcommittees will be the same as for committees. Sub-rule 5, a member may attend a meeting may attend as an observer to a meeting of the committee, which means that he doesn't take part. He can speak, but he cannot vote. So a member may attend a meeting of a committee to which he or she does not belong as an observer, but so he can speak, but he cannot vote. We can participate, for example, in various committees. That happens in many countries. But can we actually, or do we have the right to vote? No. But we can speak, yes. We would like to say that, yes, you can participate in other committees, if we have the time, of course, but you need to have the right to speak. But somebody, for example, who is not a member of our committee, somebody, for example, wasn't able to speak then, if somebody wasn't a member, but I think they should have the right to speak, but not the right to vote. Rule general function, the caucuses for Article 24. This is Rule 34. She's now referring to, not Rule 24, as was said, Rule 34, venue of sittings, where the Parliament would equally be able to organize its meetings virtually. Because during the pandemic, of course, we came across this situation. But if we do accept to work online, I think it would be perfectly normal to have our meetings online, so we don't have to actually be physically present. Rule 35, meetings to be open. Sub-rule 2, paragraph 2. Apart from the sub-rule 1, the parliamentary meetings will be able to, in fact, be held in private on the recommendation of the Bureau and the speakers. So either the Bureau or the speakers can decide that. Rule 39, languages. The languages to be used, the working languages, which should be utilized within the Pan-African Parliament. We esteemed that it wasn't necessary to amend this rule because we've already got the 5 languages which we use during our plenaries and during our working sessions. Rule 40, conduct of members in the House. Yes, the amendment has been accepted, but it should be better defined. Proposals need to be done. The Rule 86, which talks about the length of the mandate. We've got the tenure of members of the Pan-African Parliament, shall be that of his or her national parliament, or any deliberative organ, but we would like to propose an amendment that it be of 2.5 years, and that would be according to Article 12 of our protocol. That is Rule 12, which hasn't yet been ratified, but we have adopted it. That is the principle of rotation, and we would like to propose that we adopt it here as well, these 2.5 years, so a mandate of 2.5 years, which is already included in Rule 12 of the new protocol. Rule 89, Rule 89, leave of absence. We had a very long debate, and we actually were not in agreement about this. we've got two posts. We've got, or at least there are two opinions. There are members of parliament who agree that we should retain Article 89, Rule 89 as it is in its formulation, and that the others are suggesting that, yes, we should strengthen the conditions as suggested by the Committee of Rules of Procedure. Rule 93, the amendment of rules, which deals, in fact, with its application. We feel that now we should retain the formulation, its actual formulation, because we are adopting now, and then we'll come back here. We come back in August, and I think a session, an official session, during an official session. So what we would like to say is that we maintain what has already been formulated, that is the amendments which we will adopt. Maybe we won't adopt them today, because of course it is a process, and should then be applied after May 2023. And we've come to the end.
Another round of applause. Thank you, the Eastern Caucus. The Eastern Caucus.
Honorable President, Honorable Vice Presidents, Honorable Members, the Eastern Caucus considered the report that has been prepared by the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Discipline. Members of the caucus made their submissions and comments on the basis of this report. It is important to highlight from the onset that on one hand, there was a consensus on the need to amend certain specific rules. On the other, however, the caucus submits that certain rules should remain as they are formulated. Specific decisions of the caucus. Part 1 of the rules of the procedure. In respect to Part 1 on page 2 of the rules of procedure, the caucus agreed with the proposal that the word summary at the beginning should be deleted and substitute with the table of contents. This was informed by the fact that what was captured was essentially a table of contents and not a summary. On page 6, the caucus agreed with the suggested amendment to delete general provisions and substitute it with preamble. This was on the understanding that a preamble is usually used as a prelude that sets the tone for the context of the rules and other legal tests. Rule number 1, interpretation. The caucus endorsed the proposal to substitute the word interpretation with definitions. This was meant to align the term with the words and phrases used in the Constitutive Act, as well as a protocol to the treaty establishing the African Economic Community relating to the Pan-African Parliament. And the rule 1, the caucus supported the proposal to include the following under the definitions: permanent committees, regional caucus, and other deliberative body. Rule 3, organs of parliament. The committee and the caucus endorsed the proposal to include a plenary assembly and regional caucuses as organs of the Pan-African Parliament. Currently, the plenary assembly and the regional caucuses do not form part of the organs of the Pan-African Parliament. Rule 7, status, tenure, and mandate of members. The caucus deliberated at length on Rule 7. The Rules Committee had proposed an amendment to the rule to reflect the position that a member shall remain competent to perform his or her functions if he or she is re-elected or redesignated to the Pan-African Parliament by his or her national parliament and other deliberative organ. It had also been proposed that the declaration of a vacancy shall be held in abeyance until it was confirmed that a member was not redesignated or re-elected by the national parliament or other deliberative body. The motivation for such an amendment was to ensure that there was continuity and stability in the organs of parliament, particularly when one takes into account the fact that member states do not conduct elections at the same time. After serious reflection and deliberations, the caucus adopted the position that the rules, as currently stated, are adequate and there is no need for amending the rule. It was generally felt by the caucus that continuity is made possible by members who remain serving in the permanent committees and other organs when vacancies are created within Parliament by the dissolution of parliaments in member states that will be conducting elections. In this regard, however, Rule 7 should remain as is currently formulated. This position was buttressed by some caucus members who submitted that electoral processes in some countries take long to conclude, so the operation of organs of PAP must not be affected by such processes. Rule number 9, oath and solemn declaration. The caucus considered the proposal to amend Rule 9 to reflect that a member shall remain competent to perform his or her functions without having to be sworn in again if he or she is re-elected or redesignated to the Pan-African Parliament by his or her national parliament or other deliberative organ. The current practice is that members are precluded from taking part in PAP responsibilities and functions until such a time when an oath or solemn declaration has been administered. It was deemed this affects the smooth flow of business, particularly for returning members. The Eastern Caucus members submitted that every member must take an oath or solemn declaration before resuming his or her functions. It was argued that every member who comes to PAP after elections must be deemed to be a new member who must take oath because they will be starting a new mandate at the Pan-African Parliament. This is informed by the fact that members of PAP is terminated inter alia by dissolution of parliament in member states. So all returning members must take an oath or solemn declaration as provided for in the current rules of procedure. Therefore, there was no need to amend Rule 9. Rule 11, waiver of immunity. The caucus agreed with the proposal that Rule 19 remains relevant, subject to the deletion of the word "this" in the first line of Rule 11. Rule 13, conduct of Code of Conduct. The caucus considered the proposed amendment on Rule 13 must reflect that in all matters, members shall be guided in their conduct by the Code of Conduct adopted by the Plenary Assembly and administered by the Permanent Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Discipline, under the supervision of the Bureau. It was observed as currently formulated, Rule 13 was incomplete, as it only provided for drafting of the Code of Conduct by the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Discipline. To improve on Rule 13, the caucus agreed that an amendment must be done to provide that the code shall be prepared by the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Discipline and approved by the Plenary Assembly. It was also agreed that the code must be put as an appendix to the Rules of Procedure. Rules 14, 15, and 16, the caucus endorsed an amendment that ensures that there is geographical rotation in filling the position of President of the Pan-African Parliament. This was in line with the decision of the Executive Council of the African Union, and it is also consistent with the established practices and custom of the African Union. In addition to this, the caucus added that there was a need to amend the rules to provide for rotation at all levels and for all positions within the organs of the Pan-African Parliament. Furthermore, amendments must be done to ensure that there is intra-regional rotation for all positions at all levels. The caucus also suggested that in nominating candidates for position, regional caucuses must be alive to the tenure of members in their national parliaments, so that only those with a minimum of 3 years to serve in the national parliament can be nominated to the bureau or any other position within the organs. The caucus further stated that all amendments to the principle of geographical rotation must be guided by the modalities that were formulated by the Office of the Legal Counsel of the African Union when it conducted elections in 2022. Rule 20, Secretariat. It was noted that as currently formulated, the Rule 20, Section 3 gives the impression that Parliament is involved in the appointment of all officers, including junior officers. It was therefore proposed that this appointment of all officers other than the clerk and deputy clerks must be done by the Bureau. The caucus endorsed this proposal subject to the proviso that all appointments must be done in conformity with the EU rules and regulations on recruitment. This means that the appointment of the clerk and deputy clerk shall be subject to endorsement by the plenary assembly, whereas appointments below deputy clerks shall be approved by the Bureau. Rule 26, functions of the clerk. The caucus considered the proposal that the clerk must be accountable to the Bureau, not to Parliament, as stated in the Rule 21, Section E. Comments were made that several CAPA reports have highlighted challenges in respect to administrative and institutional governance at Parliament. After discussions, the caucus settled for the position that the rules must reflect that the clerk shall be accountable to Parliament through the Bureau, so that all critical organs of Parliament are involved in the governance matrix as they have shared responsibilities. It was submitted that there was no merit in removing accountability to the plenary assembly as had been proposed in the initial proposals. The committee endorsed the amendment that the powers of the clerk in conducting elections should be subject to Rule 16, Section 3. Further to this, in conducting elections, the clerk should organize the election of the president and vice presidents in accordance with approved rules of procedure on elections. Rule 22, establishment of committees. The caucus considered at length the proposal to increase the number of committees to 15, informed by the best practices that committees must be lean to be effective. The caucus further considered the proposal to align committees with the Commission of the African Union in a move to enhance oversight. The caucus suggested that any proposal to increase the number of committees should take into account the financial and human resource implications of such. In this context, the committee settled for 11 committees that mirror commissions of the African Union. The proposed committees are as follows. The Permanent Committees on Rules, Privilege, and Institutional Affairs, Committee on Audits and Public Accounts as a permanent committee, Committee on Budgetary and Financial Affairs, Committee on Political Affairs, Human Rights, and Good Governance, Committee on Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, Natural Resources, and Sustainable Development, Committee on Economic Development, Trade, Industry, and Mining, Committee on Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation, Committee on Transport, Infrastructure, and Energy, Committee on Health, Humanitarian Affairs, and Social Development, Committee on Gender, Family, Youth, Sports, and People with Disability, Committee on International and Regional Affairs or Obligations. Rule number 23, procedure for committees. The caucus agreed with the recommendation that there is a need to amend Rule 23 so that there is consistent use of nomenclature. For the English version of the rules of procedure, it was agreed that instead of a president of a committee as captured in Rule 23, the proper terminology is the chairperson of a committee. This must apply throughout the rules of procedure. The caucus reiterated in all the texts of rules of procedure there must be consistency on the use of nomenclature in order to avoid confusion. Rule 39, languages. The caucus agreed that Rule 39 should remain as currently configured. The proposal has been to amend the rule so that it is aligned with the formulation of Article 11, official languages, on the Protocol on Amendments of the Constitutive Act of the African Union. Article 11 of the said protocol states that the official languages of the Union and all its institutions shall be Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Kiswahili, and any other African languages. Rule 20, conduct of members in the House. The caucus agreed with the proposal to amend Rule 40 so that it is in line with the use of ICT developments in the transaction of business in Parliament. As such, Rule 41, G and H must be amended to be permissive to the use of tablets, iPads, electronic notebooks, and other ICT gadgets in Parliament. Currently, the rule provides that a member shall not bring other electronic device in the House. This rule can be couched in such a way that it recognizes the importance of technology in the plenary business of Parliament. The caucus also reiterated the rule on banning arms and weapons in the House should be a standalone rule as opposed to the current formulation where it is combined with the use of tape recorders. Rule 89, leave of absence. The caucus agreed that to ensure attendance, parliaments must make use of the sanction of naming those members who absent themselves from session without leave. The caucus highlighted that this sanction, when used with other measures in Rule 89, may assist the regulation of attendance. Members so named must be referred to the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Discipline. Rule 93, effective date of the amendments. The caucus proposed that Rule 93 and Rule 94 must be aligned so that amendments become effective on the day of adoption by the plenary assembly. Procedure on the removal of members of the Bureau. The caucus proposed that Article 12 of the Protocol to the Treaty establishing the African Economic Community relating to the Pan-African Parliament should be made part of the rules of procedure. This article details the procedure for the removal of the President and the Vice President on grounds of misconduct or failure to perform his or her functions for reasons of physical and mental incapacity. Entitlements and allowance for members. Members agreed that the rules of procedure must be specific on the entitlements and allowances of members of Parliament. There was need to provide for members' sitting allowance for both sessions and committee meetings. The rules should also specify that a member of Parliament traveling on official business must travel in business class. Medical insurance cover must also be provided. Members also agreed on the need to be provided with identity card that will enable them to be identified as members of Pan-African Parliament. Other submissions, the caucus proposed that Rule 35 on the venue of sittings must be aligned with Rule 2 on the seat of Parliament. To conclude, the caucus agreed that all comments and decisions made in the meeting held on the 25th of October adequately reflected the position of the Eastern African Region Caucus. As such, there was no need to consider amendments to other rules as they were deemed relevant and effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Eastern Caucus. Another round of applause. Thank you, Northern Caucus. Honorable Azadin.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, Madam Vice President, dear colleagues,
votre contribution s'est articulée
Our contribution is based on a methodology with two parts. And there is a general debate, and the second part is the presentation of amendments drafted or suggested by our caucus. The general debate that occurred in the first part looked at inconsistencies, contradictions, confusion contained in the current rules of procedure in comparison with what is necessary to change. In other words, work in such a way that all new rules of procedures be effective and operational. Therefore, this principle is the principle of legitimacy, which is the implementation of explicit rules of nomination and supervision of those who are in power. There is also the principle of functionality, and that means a power that is legitimately decided upon would lose its legitimacy, would have to fulfill all its functions. There is also the principle of separation of powers, the distinction of organs that set rules and exercising the duties of responsibility. And then there is the principle of responsibility, which is the obligation for each powers that be to be accountable to those who have voted for them. There is the principle of coherence between the organs and bodies, and that is complementarity and clarity between them. There is the principle of receivability, meaning to respond to any evolution of the situation. There is the principle of forward-looking spirit to be able to anticipate the tendencies that are observed. Those are these principles that have given clarification to us in order for us to make proposals. These proposals then are going to be presented to you by Madam the Rapporteur.
لقد ناقشت المجموعة الإقليمية
Thank you, Mr. President. The North Africa Caucus has discussed what has been presented and has the following recommendations. We need to establish a committee for the language revision of the rules of procedures, the terms and definitions, as well as proposals for amendments of the rules of procedure should be harmonized, as well as in all the documents of the African Union concerning the Pan-African Parliament. We need to say that the principle of rotation is a basic principle, including the position of President of PAP and all caucuses. In the event of vacancy in bureaus of the various organs of the Pan-African Parliament, this position must be filled by the representative of the same country occupying it. We also need to have virtual meeting mechanisms to prepare meetings that necessitate the presence of delegations for sessions. The discussions are members of committees can only vote in committees in which they are members. Following what has been suggested for the Rule 1, for example, definition The rule has been approved as described. Rule 3 approved. Rule 7, quality and a term of office in the event of re-election or re-nomination of a member. The vacant post is not announced until we are sure of the re-election of that member or not by the national parliament. It was proposed that in the event of re-election of the member who is a member of the Bureau, the position must remain for the country that representative comes from in compliance with Rule 7. Rule 9, taking oath or solemn declaration upon coming into office. It was proposed that former members re-elected by the national parliaments do not have to take the oath. But for new members that have been appointed to the Pan-African Parliament, the caucus suggests that we take the oath in writing. And until the person can actually take the oath during a physical meeting of the actual session. Rule 11, waiver of immunity, that was accepted while indicating that this amendment does not correspond to the Arabic version of Rule 11. Rule 13, Code of Conduct. The caucus said that this Code of Conduct text had to be improved. Then Rule 15, nominations. The members of the caucus have suggested to extend the Pan-African Parliament so that there are 2 members per region. Rule 16 was accepted, but a proposal was adopted in terms of the clerk and deputy clerk to be appointed by the Bureau. Rule 22 accepted as is. Rule 23, procedure of permanent committees. The proposal was accepted whilst indicating that the amendment suggested does not correspond to Rule 23 in the Arabic version of the Rules of Procedure. Rule 29 was accepted. Rule 40, conduct of parliamentarians, conduct of members in the House. Amendments have been proposed here. Mobile phones should not be allowed, as well as laptops, or else mobile phones should be in silent mode before entering the chamber. Rule 89, the members of the caucus suggested that this be part of the Code of Conduct. The members asked what was the law to be applied when there is leave of absence, and it was said that it was necessary to mention the fact that the leave of absence is not justified. Also, the departure for national elections cannot be considered as an unjustified absence. Rule 90 accepted, 91 accepted. A report of the workshop that was presented by the Committee on Rules. The recommendations were discussed for preparing the report. The recommendation is as follows. Concerning the organs of the Pan-African Parliament, the caucus accepted the recommendation number 1 by adding regional caucuses, a youth caucus, and also by adding a new organ, and that is the Committee of the Speakers for coordination for the Conference of Speakers. This conference will be organized by the coordination organ. Remit of the clerk approved. The group refused the proposal, saying that the position should be filled during the first section. Concerning the Committee on Rules, a recommendation approved as far as procedures to ensure that new members are recommended, taking into account Rule 9 of the first document. As far as the removal of members is concerned, that was accepted with a reservation concerning conditions. As far as procedures of a drafting of model laws, that has been approved. Virtual statutory sessions have been approved, whilst bearing in mind that we have to use virtual meetings to prepare physical meetings. As far as the electronic vote is concerned, that has been approved in the condition that all necessary resources for voting strengthens this process and reinforces trust. It is also indicated that the remit of all organs of the Pan-African Parliament have been mentioned, and as far as elections are concerned, the recommendation has been approved, while emphasizing the principle of rotation as a basic principle for all organs of the Pan-African Parliament. Thank you. Phew.
We now move to the Southern Caucus.
Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, the three honorable vice presidents present here, honorable members of this august house, allow me to greet you this afternoon when the Southern Caucus 2 days ago celebrated 58th year of Zambia Independence Day. We stand here very proud that Zambia has 58 years of their independence. Can we give them a round of applause? Simbafani Mani, yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you. Just bring life to the house. Thank you very much, honorable members. Honorable members, with the powers vested on the chairperson of the region, I hereby table the report of the Southern region, and thank you very much to my honorable chairs who have already presented their reports. We met as per the program on the 24th and the 25th of October to consider the amendments as per the two documents of reference that were given as these caucuses. We have debated robustly so and came to these following recommendations in terms of amendments where we agree and where we are making some additions. We further looked at the layout of this document, which is the procedure of rules in the Pan-African Parliament. And we are saying a special team must be constituted just to align the layout so that it can be easy to follow this document. It was not a matter that was identified, but we felt that we must start there because the guiding document must have an ease flow. On page 2, on the rules of procedure, we agree with other regions that summary should be replaced by table of contents, because when you have table of contents, it gives you a proper sequence of what is supposed to happen inside this document. From chapter 1 to chapter 7, what is there? So it assists you to follow the document. On page 6, the title, we agree that when you substitute general provisions and replace it with a preamble, preamble gives identity to the institution that you are referring to. Under Rule 1, interpretation, it gives a very ambiguity in terms of definition, but let it be straightforward and be replaced by the word definitions. The following should be included in the definitions, we fully agree. The regional caucuses, permanent committees, plenary, and other deliberative organs. In this regard, we want to emphasize as the Southern Caucus that the deliberative organ will mean a body which is democratically established by a member state, not a spaza shop of some kind, a small thing at the corner, a coup d'etat of some kind. We are saying democratic in the definition of a democratic government, not any other thing besides this. Rule 3, regional caucuses and permanent committees should be acted as organs of PAP. This is to institutionalize PAP, we fully agree. On Rule 7, it should be amended to reflect the position that a member must remain competent to perform his or her functions if he or she is re-elected or redesignated to the Pan-African Parliament by his or her national parliament or other deliberative organ. Consequently, the declaration of a vacancy should be held in abeyance until it is confirmed that the member who was occupying that particular vacancy is not re-elected or redesignated by a national parliament or other deliberative organ. Furthermore, we say the rule should be amended to reflect that a member shall remain competent to perform his or her functions without having to be sworn in again. Because when you go for elections, you don't go for elections for more than 6 months. But we have tried to contextualize that under normal circumstances, parliaments get constituted within 30, 60, 90 days under normal circumstances. Therefore, let's say we will give time for between 90 and 120 days. However, there can be no vacuum during that time, because you do have those who are deputizing. They will be acting in the meantime. Why are we feeling very strong about this as the Southern region? We're feeling very strong about it because we have to stabilize the Pan-African Parliament. We have to ensure that there is continuity in the Pan-African Parliament. We must avoid disruption in the Pan-African Parliament. That is why we're fully behind and supporting this Rule 7, that we must try to bring political stability and continuity and ensure that the visionary leadership, be it a member of the Bureau, or a member of the Bureau of the Committee, or a member of the Bureau of the Caucus, all those leaders, when they've been assigned position, let's wait for them to come back. If they don't come back, then we'll continue to do in line with what is supposed to happen when you feel a vacancy. On Rule 9, it should be amended to provide that in case of re-election or redesignation, a member shall not be required to be sworn in, because that member is coming back to not more than 3 years. So that member was sworn in within 3 years. So this member is coming back within months apart that year he went or she went for elections. This is in line with the previous rule that I've referred to, Rule 7. Furthermore, the swearing in of new members, as it is currently happening, they get sworn in on ordinary sessions. If you come in November as a new member, when the session is not, when the session is not on, you'll be sworn in May. What do? You just idle. You are just a fellow traveler. You are not a member. Even if you get injured here, we don't even know who you are. It is important, therefore, that the Bureau is empowered and mandated that in between the sessions, the ordinary sessions, they must sworn in new members so as to allow PAP to continue its business. But it is important that the Rules Committee must play their role. Experience is the best teacher. We have observed here in this Pan-African Parliament where people who were not properly elected from their countries got sworn in here. And therefore, we must be watertight in dealing with such an issue. People must be processed accordingly to check that they are coming from a democratically elected institution and the mandate is within the powers of that national parliament, not a junior official to write a letter and send people here. Rule 11. The rule should be amended to remove language ambiguity by removing the word "this" in the first line, Rule 11, subsection 1. Rule 13 should be amended to provide for the code of conduct to be adopted by the plenary and should be administered by the permanent committees on rules, privileges, and discipline under the supervision of the Bureau. Rule 15 and 16, I'll read them simultaneously, should be amended to provide for the principle of regional rotation in accordance with the principles of the African Union. We know where we come from. We know that finally we achieved the principle on rotation, and that must be in the rules, black and white, and it cannot be defied because it is in the rules. In addition, for instance, North knows that they are idling. After South, it will be them. So they are not going to, there will be no fight about it. Hence, we are saying let's institutionalize this and put that in black and white. Rule 16, so we'll be handing a baton over to you, North. You should be smiling over there. Rule 16 should be amended to reflect that in the event of a vacancy in the Bureau, the member temporarily nominated, underline, temporarily nominated shall do so to complete the term of his or her predecessor from that region, not from another region. from that same region whose turn is to be president or vice president, there will be no open election or canvassing for that position. Furthermore, you can do better. Thank you, honorable members. Furthermore, in the event of a vacancy being occasioned by an election of a member state where the Bureau members come from, filling of the positions shall be held in abeyance until the electoral process in that member state are concluded. If the member is re-elected or redesignated by the National Parliament, where he comes or she comes from, or a deliberative organ, such a member shall resume his or her position in the Bureau. The principle of rotation should also apply in committees of caucus. All members of this PAP must get an opportunity. There are no traditional leaders when it comes to the committees of PAP. There is no royal inheritance of power when it comes to committees, and therefore let's allow rotation to take place. Rule 17 should be amended to include the provision of for the member of the Bureau to be domiciled and at PAP on a rotational basis where PAP is not in session. I repeat this because the Bureau is just behind me. Rule 17 should be amended to include the provision for the members of the Bureau to be domiciled at PAP on a rotational basis when PAP is not in session. What we have observed is that we come to PAP as if we are coming to a picnic festival. We pack our bags, we come and dance, then we go back, then in May you remember, let's go back to PAP. There are decisions, there are resolutions that have been taken. Who politically monitors such? Who politically oversight and oversee the administration of PAP? No one. We are therefore recommending that the vice president and the president must on a rotational basis ensure that they occupy the space and not leave any political vacuum. Rule 20 should be amended to provide for all appointments of staff of PAP other than the clerk and the deputy clerks to be the mandate of the Bureau. The reasons being that if all appointments are done at AU level, you will never have control of your own administration that you're supposed to lead. They'll be telling you with no certain terms that you are not my employer. And therefore, that mandate must be brought back home to the Bureau of Pan-African Parliament. Those powers must be devolved to PAP. Rule 21, paragraph E should be amended to reflect the clerk shall be accountable to the Bureau and to Parliament. And we are very conscious on that. There is no mix-up of lines of accountability. The Parliament becomes the highest decision-making body. The Bureau also reports to Parliament on the developments in PAP. But here we are trying to restrict the free-for-all, where the clerk will undermine the Bureau and want to come running and crying to Parliament. We are saying the Bureau is responsible for the clerk, where the clerk must account, but the clerk must also account to Parliament through the Bureau. so that we close any gap that might be taken advantage of, where a person will think that he or she is untouchable. We are talking from experience. It has happened here. And this review of rules, it gives us an opportunity to correct the wrongs of the past. You cannot be a bureau that has no control over administration. Rule 20 should be amended. No. Okay, Rule 22, Sub-Rule 1, should be amended to provide for 17 committees. We are saying 17 committees. We have seen the proposal of 15. And if we start attaching money value to the work of the committees, we're going to lose it. The current committees are congested. The current committees need to be unbundled so that they can focus on the bigger agenda of this continent. And therefore, we're saying we must use all possible means of ensuring that they work. The traditional way of doing things, where we could only meet physically, it's gone. You can meet on a virtual platform, full virtual, the committee can do its work. You can meet on a hybrid session. You can meet on a physical session. And therefore, we must be flexible and go with times. The Southern region is recommending 17 committees. Committee on Rural Economy, Agriculture, and Natural Resources. And we are prioritizing this because we understand that Africa is rich in natural resources, but very poor. Committee on Mining, Energy, Environment, and Climate Change. In the current committees, there is no climate change. We have included climate change because of what is happening in the global world about climate change, which is affecting us as the continent. Committee on Monetary, Financial Affairs and Administration, leave it as it is. Committee on Trade, Custom and Industry. Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution, leave it as it is. But have a standalone committee on transport, standalone committee on health, then committee on labor, human resources and social affairs. Committee on Education. Because of the challenges of education, allow this committee to be a standalone committee to be able to do work because it is a broad committee. It deals with early child development centers, the primary schools, the high schools, the tertiary. So allow it to be a standalone committee. Committee on Science, Technology and Communications. Committee on Tourism, Arts, Culture and Heritage. Especially to us as Africans, it is very important that we must connect our tourism and to build our own economy. Tourism become central when you align it with arts, culture, and our own heritage. We had heritage. We still have heritage, but we're made not to appreciate what we have because of our colonizers. Committee on Audit and Public Accounts, leave it as it is. Committee on Family, Gender, Senior Citizens, and people with disabilities. And we are very conscious to say senior, not too old. I don't want to go back to what I said previous time about the old things, but we're talking about senior citizens. Committee on Youth, Employment, and Sport. We are inserting employment because we have a youthful population in the continent. That youthful population is unemployed. And when riots start, they start with the youth because they are so disillusioned. Nobody is talking about their employment opportunities. And therefore, let's put that issue of employment in that committee. Committee on Justice, Human Rights and Immigration, leave it as it is. Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Discipline, it must be as it is. Then the Committee on Programming, Monitoring and Evaluation. For any institution to thrive, it must program correctly. We have all experienced how haphazard we are as PAP. If a meeting is supposed to start at 9, it starts at 11, the next thing is changed, the next thing is cancelled. But if you have a programming committee, it will look at all those and come up with a program that is not gonna just be changed anyhow. So hence the programming is very important, but also to give a content in the program. Rule 23 should be amended to streamline the use of word chairpersons of committees. This should be, there should be a consistency in the use of the chairpersons of committees and should be it should not be interchanged with the president. However, we understand that in the English version, when you talk president and you talk chairperson, those are two different positions. And we are not going to fight about that with the French speaking, because in French is president. Yeah, I like it. President. Yeah, and you cannot fight about that. We cannot fight about that because we are plugged in the language of our colonizers. Hence, others are saying chairperson, others are saying president. Because in English, when we say president, we refer to president of the Pan-African Parliament. We refer to vice president of Pan-African Parliament. Rule 39 should be amended to specify the official language of the African Union. Rule 40 should be amended in paragraphs G and H, relating to the use of the electronic devices to reflect technological developments and provide rules for the use of such electronic device in plenary as well as in committees. Consequence to this, the rules on electronic devices, further rules should be developed for virtual sittings or virtual sessions, hybrid, because if you are on a full virtual as Pan-African Parliament, it must be known that the space you are occupying in your own house is the space of Pan-African Parliament at the time you are in session. So we must agree that you are not going to open your video, then we see your kids and your wife and husband going up and down. There must be order in that space, and that space at that time is declared as Parliament. So the decorum of the house must be kept there in your own house. And we further say, for both hybrid, there must be rules. For full virtual, there must be rules. Rule 40 should be amended to provide for specific decorum regarding the procession of the president and his or her entourage into plenary, as well as other rules relating to the movement of members. Here, we are all guilty. When the president is coming, there's just no order here. But there is also no order in the procession. When in our parliaments, when there is a procession, you see that there's a procession. The sergeant at arms at the front, followed by the president, the vice president. But here you see the staff with files going up and down, being part of the procession. It does not occur well. It's very clumsy. It's very clumsy how we're doing things here. So we are saying, let there be a clear order of procession when we come in the house. Even when they leave, allow them to leave the chamber, then take all the pictures, the selfies outside. Don't pull them out of the procession. You seem not to want this. Chairperson, you seem not to want this. Now, Rule 89 should be amended to provide punctuality and absenteeism of members to plenary and to committee sessions. This is not the number that was supposed to be here. Not that the countries have not paid for people to be here. They've been paid for. They are here, but they're not here. They are somewhere on extramural activities that their countries have not sent them to come and do here. Do them on your late hours, whatever you want to do. Honorable President, in conclusion, the caucus, Rule 93, on the effective date of amendments, these amendments that we're busy with, we are saying these amendments must be effective immediately upon their adoption. The Southern Caucus also noted that there are some corrections that need to be made with regard to the naming of countries. You will note that the Constitutive Act of PAP, it was adopted in 2000, and therefore a lot has happened. The case in hand here is where you see that the king of Eswatini is still referred to as King of Swaziland, whereas the country has changed or renamed itself as a Kingdom of Eswatini. So those are minor, that's a minor error that we've noted. Over the years, the countries have renamed themselves. Furthermore, the processions of the presiding officers must be more formal, be afforded the symbols of parliament authority. In our various parliaments, we have a symbol of parliament that gives authority that the house is in session. And if the house is in session, whether you have mercy or whatever you call it, you cannot just cross here to come here. But also, members, some members, they sleep and sleep, then wake up, jump, go out. When there is a member who's speaking, just cross the floor. Things that we don't do in our own parliaments, those rules must also be enforced, that there are do's and don'ts when you are in parliament. You cannot just cross when there is a speaker on the platform, cross just in front of that speaker. As you come with the procession, President, if you are coming for the first time in PAP, you don't know who's the president, you don't know who's the clerk, because clerks are not identified. They are all on suits, just like you. So there must be an identity and separation of powers here. The clerks must be robbed in whatever that we will be agreeing upon. But also, we want to have a symbol of authority, and that symbol of authority must be in the African context. We agree with allowance, sitting allowance for members. We agree with diplomatic passport for members. We agree with the medical insurance. We agree that members of PAP must be accorded status like any other organ, that they must also fly business class when they are doing their business. We agree with the identity cards. The ones that you have when you get out of this PAP on the 12th year, we are no longer members of PAP, you are not known here, you cannot enter here. Those police are going to arrest you. You are not known, there's nothing that you can produce to say, no, I'm a member of parliament, show us. You have nothing. Because this plastic thing, it has a date of your arrival and a date when you're supposed to leave. Other than that, you are treated as a criminal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Southern Caucus. Another round of applause. I think the next one is the Western Caucus. Western Caucus, you have the advantage of summarizing and identifying all the gaps. Thank you.
Honorable President, Vice Presidents, honorable members, the Secretariat and all support staff, and the media, Assalamu alaikum. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the Western Caucus to present to you the recommendations on the amendment of the Rules of Procedure of the Pan-African Parliament. The Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, in collaboration with the Committee on Rules, Privileges and Discipline, established a process by which the prior recommendations, resolutions, and Executive Council decisions relating to the amendment of the Rules of Procedure of the Pan-African Parliament can be implemented. Pursuant to this established process and following several consultative workshops on the amendment of rules, the West African Regional Caucus convened on the 24th to the 25th October 2022 to deliberate on gaps in the Rule of Procedure and other amendments as provided in the subsequent provisions of this report. In the conduct of our deliberations, we relied on the following substantive documents. 1, the current Rules of Procedure that is the subject of this amendment process. 2, the current protocol of the Constitutive Act of the African Union relating to the Pan-African Parliament. 3, a report of the Committee on Rules, Privileges and Discipline on the consultative workshop on the revision of the Rules of Procedure of the PAP. And 4th, a report titled Gaps Identified in the Rules of Procedure. After very rigorous and vibrant deliberations and due consideration to the documents referenced above, the following recommendations were made, including anecdotal notes or concerns specifically stipulated to provoke considerations or future discussions on certain critical elements affecting the institution and the administration of the rules of its Rules of Procedure. On page 2, the Rules of Procedure, the title Summary, we are recommending that should be replaced by the title Table of Content. On page 6, the title General Provisions should be replaced with the word Preamble. Now we go to Rule 1. The title Interpretation should be replaced with Definitions. B, concerns were raised on the use of abusive use of capital letters. It was noted that the French Academy defined the context in which you have to use a capital letter. So these are talking about the French version. There are inconsistent use of terms, phrases, and nomenclature, and as such, a result, it is recommended that all the definitions in the Rules of Procedure be aligned and made compatible to the definitions used in the protocol of the Constitutive Act of the African Union relating to the Pan-African Parliament. D, additionally, the following are currently not covered in the Rules of Procedure, and it is recommended that they be defined in terms of consistent with their relevant functions. 1, a regional caucus. 2, permanent committees. 3, any other deliberative organ of a member state. It is stipulated that the definition should reflect a body democratically established in a member state or recognized by the African Union. E, define and expand the Bureau to include the bureaucracies. Rule number 3, organs of the Parliament. The regional caucus should be added to the organs of Parliament, thereby making the composition of the organs of Parliament to now consist of the Bureau and the bureaucracies. That is the Bureau, the Permanent Committee, and the regional caucuses. On Rule 5, powers of the Parliament, it is recommended that Section 5D be expanded to include the power to make recommendations and formulate resolutions on involvement in any international conflict. The members of Parliament recognize that the phrase on any matters, quote, is all-encompassing and could be construed to include the area stipulated above, but notes that the phrase on any matters is missing in the French version. B, the rules should reflect the provisions of Rule 4H as it relates to the functions of Parliament and indicate that the Parliament shall have the power to exercise legislative and other functions as shall be defined by the Assembly in conformity with Article 11 of the Protocol. Rule 7, that is status, tenure, and mandate of members. Number 1, this rule should be amended to reflect the position that a member shall remain competent to perform his or her function if he or she is re-elected or redesignated to the Pan-African Parliament by his or her national parliament or other deliberative organ. Declaration of a vacancy shall be held in abeyance until it is confirmed that a member was not re-elected or redesignated or re-elected by a national parliament or other deliberative body. B,
As additional note, it is recommended that a policy be established to protect members whose potential recall by principal officers of their respective national parliaments or any other deliberative organ or members of state may be predicated on a personal political ploy or a personal political victimization. While recognizing that each country is sovereign and designations are the prerogative of national parliaments, PAP should consider measures to ensure that the exercise of that prerogative is not applied to punish a member of parliament or manipulated to achieve a narrow political agenda. In this scenario, the designated parliamentarians should be allowed to complete his or her term unless there is an incompatibility, such as in the case of an appointment to a ministerial position. Members recall the instance related to the vice president of the PAP from Tanzania, whose recall was allegedly instigated by a parliamentarian for a political ploy. Rule number 8, vacation of seat. It is recommended that an additional section be provided to reflect that the seat of a member shall become vacant if he or she is absent for 3 consecutive terms, with exceptions made for genuine reasons for absenteeism, such as serious sickness. The rationale advanced for this position or provision is to enhance responsibility and to ensure that the Pan-African Parliament as an institution benefits from the wealth of experience and knowledge embodied in its delegation through an active engagement and participation by all members. B, while admitting that some measures for absenteeism needs to be adopted, the members in making the above recommendation urge the Bureau to consider the need to make reasonable accommodation for sitting allowances as a method of reducing the rate of absenteeism. Rule 9, oath or solemn declaration upon coming into office. A, it is noted that despite the provisions and requirements of this rule as stipulated in section 1, the text of the oath is not as set out in the addendum, these rules of procedure. It is recommended that it be provided. B, without prejudice to our proposed amendment to Rule 7, where we recommended that a member shall remain competent to perform his or her function if he or she is re-elected or redesignated to the Pan-African Parliament by his or national parliament or other deliberative organ. We, however, recommend, that the returning member must be sworn in again. C, in taking this position, the members stipulate that the administration of oath as required here will not affect the timing for the resumption of duty in the position held prior to departing for elections, but however, should be conducted at the next available time frame provided in the PAP schedule. While awaiting for the administration of oath, the affected member shall continue in the conduct of his or her previously elected function. Rule 10, privileges and immunities. While not recommending any specific changes in the rule, members would like to reflect their demand for enforcement of the provision of Section 5 and 6 and pertaining to entitlement for diplomatic passports and sitting allowances respectively. Members further puts on record their request for restoration of health insurance as part of the privileges of members of Parliament. Rule 11, that's waiver of immunity. The provision of this rule remains relevant with the exception of the recommendation to delete the word "this" as it is redundant in the sentence. So we want that to be removed in the first line of the Rule 11.1. On Rule 13, that is the Code of Conduct. Members note of the fact that there is an existing Code of Conduct already in place. Members take note of the recommendation that the rule must reflect that in all matters, members shall be guided in their behavior by the Code of Conduct adopted by the plenary assembly and administered by the permanent committees or rules, privileges, discipline under the supervision of the Bureau, and that Rule 13 must be aligned to Rule 14 on the conduct of members in the House. Rule 14, that's the Bureau of Parliament. It is recommended that this rule be amended to provide for the principle of geographical rotation. B, members further recommend that the rotation should be structured to accommodate only one term of office for a period of 2 years. It should be noted that some members express a firm opinion that the provisions of the protocol for a term of 2.5 years across the board. C, the members further stipulated that all provisions in the PAP rules of procedure be amended to reflect the above stipulation on term and the period of office to the extent they are inconsistent with this recommendation, with this recommended amendment, and particularly related to Rule 16 sub Rule 10 and Rule 86 sub Rule 2. While embracing in totality the principle of rotation, members wish to identify significant concerns on inequity relating to the numerical composition of various regions and urge the Bureau to consider increasing the numbers in the Bureau to reflect this imbalance. E. Further to the above stated concern, members urge the Bureau to consider establishing an internal rotation protocol where in the event all countries in a particular region have attained the position of presidency, the region in question should instead, taking second turns, allow the reallocation to the next region whose countries have not yet completely presided over the parliament as president. Rule 15, nomination of candidates. Members stipulate that the process and modalities of nominating candidates as provided herein must be in accordance with the principle of rotation as set out in Rule 14. Rule 16, election of members of the Bureau. Members recommend that the amendment shall be guided by the modalities applied by the African Union and subject to the term limit amendment previously stipulated in reference to Section 10 relating to our recommended provision for one term of 2 years. It should also be noted again that some members express firm opinion to maintain the provision as indicated in the protocol for 2.5 years across the board. B, we further provide that Rule 16 sub Rule 11 must be structured in such a way that it is specific to the Bureau. Consequently, in the event of a vacancy in the Bureau, the member temporarily nominated by the region to act shall do so to complete the term of his or her predecessor. C, in the event of a vacancy being occasioned by the election in the member state where the member of the Bureau comes from, filling of the position shall be held in abeyance until the electoral process in the member state are concluded. If the member is re-elected, if the member is elected or redesignated by the National Parliament or other deliberative organ, such member must resume his or her position in the Bureau. Rule 20, the Secretariat. Rule 20, sub Rule 3, as currently formulated, gives the impression that Parliament, which is the plenary, is involved in the appointment of all officers, including junior officers. Our submission is that the appointment of all officers other than the clerk and deputy clerk must be done by the Bureau. Parliament should only come in the appointment of the clerk and the deputy clerk. Rule 21, that is the function of the clerk. The clerk must be accountable to the Bureau, not to the Parliament as stated in Rule 21E. The powers of the clerk in conducting elections should be subject to Rule 16, sub Rule 3. Further to this, in conducting elections, the clerk should organize the elections of the president and vice presidents in accordance with the approved rules of procedure on elections and will be subject to or subordinated to the authority of the ad hoc committee on elections. On Rule 22, that is the establishment of committees. We recommend that the current configuration of committees will need to be restructured and decongested. We are guided by the need for the committees to reflect the thematic areas of the African Union. We believe that this restructuring will promote effective oversight. B, we therefore propose the following thematic realignment, that is to 14 committees. Number 1, the Committee on Natural Resources, Environment, Extractive Industries, and Energy. Number 2, the Committee on Agriculture, Rural Economy, and Food Security. Number 3, the Committee on Monetary and Financial Affairs. 4, the Committee on Trade and Customs. 5, the Committee on Immigration Matters and Security. 6, the Committee on Cooperation, International Relations, and Conflict Resolutions. 7, the Committee on Transport and Industry. 8, the Committee on Communications, Science and Technology. 9, the Committee on Health, Labor and Social Affairs. 10, the Committee on Education and Human Resources. 11, the Committee on Culture and Tourism. 12, the Committee on Gender, Family, Youth, and People with Disability. 13, the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. And the 14, that is the Committee on Rules, Privileges, Ethics, and Discipline. On C, we note the increasing importance of CAPA to institutional financial regulatory stability, and thereby recommend that it be designated as a permanent committee as well. On Rule 23, procedures of committees. A, we recommend that this rule be amended so that there is consistent use of nomenclature. instead of a president of a committee as captured in Rule 23, the proper terminology is chairperson of a committee. B, the use of the term president should only be reserved for the president of the Pan-African Parliament. This must apply through the rules of procedure. And we are also aware that the lack of that word in the French version, they normally use that word. So we are okay, we are talking only about the English version. On Rule 28, ordinary sessions. We recommend that a section be included to reflect the 2 committee sittings or any other heading as may be deemed appropriate to introduce the sittings. Rule 29, that is extraordinary sessions. We recommend that it should be amended to include a stipulation on who bears the cost of the extraordinary session. We recognize that extraordinary session comes with high cost implications. We therefore further recommend that it be borne by which organ is initiating the session, either the AU or the Pan-African Parliament. Rule 32, time of sittings. We recommend that some emphasis be placed on timely resumption and attendance of meetings in these times stipulated. This will ensure comprehensive and exhaustive deliberations on issues before the Parliament. On Rule 36, that is order of business for each session, we affirm the provision of this rule and wish for the Bureau to take note of our request for a strict enforcement of the provisions of Section 3 that requires a 48-hour timeline for dissemination of the final draft order of business. On Rule 39, languages, we recommend that textual construction of Rule 39 must be aligned with the formulation in the Constitutive Act as amended with specific reference to official languages. And on Rule 40, conduct of members in the House. A, we propose that amendment be made to Rule 40. G, to remove reference to tape recorder and other electronic device. We further recommend that it be amended to prescribe any other dangerous equipment or items. B, we propose that amendment be made to Rule 40H to alternatively provide that phones can either be switched off or placed in silent mode pursuant to the need to reflect the emerging technological developments and environmental considerations. Rule 54, power of the President to adjourn House or suspend sitting. Request is hereby tabled that this authority and power should be extended to the committee chairpersons for and during committee sittings, and that the relevant section on the rules of procedure and relating to committees should be amended to reflect this authority. Voting. We note with concern that the threshold stipulated in this rule and under Section C is too high and should be adjusted to simple majority. Rule 54, seconded motions. Request is hereby submitted that this process for seconding of motions should be made applicable to committee proceedings as well, and that the relevant section on the committees in these rules of procedure should be amended to reflect this same requirement. Rule 70, content of questions. We are concerned with the restriction placed on the word controversial on the English version. Questions on Section 3, and believe it is too restrictive to apply to the ability of the Parliament to engage in constructively on prevailing continental issues. While we acknowledge the need to refrain from questions that may create discord, we request that the word controversial be defined, rephrased, or clarified, or reframed. Rule 82, drafting and procedure of the budget. A, concern is noted on Section A1 and the proper notation of the full title of Secretary General in the French version is missing the word general. B, we note with concern that the French version of our rules of procedure seem incompatible with acceptable translations with particular reference to certain words. C, we urge the Bureau to ensure that accurate translations are conducted with the revised rules of procedure. D, we recommend the need to require a budget execution report, which should be done at the beginning of the following fiscal year and for the year prior, so as to reflect issues of utilization and underutilization. On Rule 82, in Section B, should include a language or clause mandating the President to bring back feedback from the recommendations made on monetary affairs to the Assembly. F, Parliament should stipulate a timeline to which the AU must respond in writing to all recommendations made by the Parliament. On Rule 83, that is establishment and composition of regional caucuses. We recommend that section be amended to reflect chairperson and vice chairperson and not president or vice president as presently contained. B, we further recommend that a clause be added to mandate the application of the principle of rotation among the countries, in particular regional caucuses. We further request that the modalities for the application of the principle of rotation be properly structured and defined using the composition of regional caucuses. D, all other AU principles on member states shall be deemed equally applicable. On Rule 84, functions of regional caucuses, we recommend that Section 2 be amended to reflect chairperson and not the president, as we indicated earlier. B, we recommend that youth caucus and women caucus be clearly recognized and identified in separate rules with clearly defined functions and leadership structure. C, we recommend that a senior citizens caucus be introduced and established as a consultative and advisory caucus of the Pan-African Parliament. Rule 86, that is functions of regional caucuses. We recommend that Section 2 be amended to reflect a non-renewable single term of 2 years. It should be noted that some members express a firm opinion to maintain the provisions of the protocol for a term of 2.5 years across the board. Rule 90, annual parliamentary program. We recommend that the president of committee be changed to chairperson or committee. However, this may be unnecessary if you consider the following recommendation, where we request that the language that reads the bureau shall be in conjunction with the president of the committee, be amended and replaced to reflect the bureau shall in conjunction with the bureaucracies. On Rule 91, accounts and audit, we recommend that Section 3 of this rule be amended to take into account the role of CAPA. And on Rule 93, effective date of amendments, A, we recommend that Section 2 be amended to reflect the specific provision of present and voting. However, some members also deem that that may not be necessary. B, we further recommend that stipulation be specifically provided to require that all amendments shall be effective immediately upon their adoption, in particular consonance with Rule 93, Sub-Rule 3 of the current rules of procedure. This is to reflect the urgent and critical nature of these amendments to the smooth administration of the institution of the Pan-African Parliament. On a final note, honorable members, the committee, the West African Caucus also have, some members have a firm belief that there is a need for gender to be considered across the board as well. We must ensure that in all positions of the PAP, we must also think about gender balance. And on that note, I want to thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Western Caucus. Another round of applause. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe the rules are coming. It's always appropriate just to raise your hand, draw attention, then you take the floor. In a parliament, you only take the floor if granted permission. That's one weakness of our parliament, which you don't do in your own parliament. So this warm, we are all uncomfortable. I had to ask the clerk, say, look, this is too warm. The problem is that there's no power. The generator, which is lighting here, does not have capacity to power the air cons. That's the problem. Probably we need more capacity, bigger generators. But I stand here to say we as a bureau are very excited with the way we are moving in amending our rules. Amending rules is about process. And that process should be inclusive. Allow members to offload their minds on the rules. And I think on that score we have done it very well. If you look at the quality, the depth of scrutiny here, you see that we have, in terms of process, I think we are second to none. We have scrutinized these rules, and the comments coming up are excellent. Now, it's clear that in this exercise, you cannot have 100% agreement at the first presentation, not possible. In fact, elsewhere they say where there are more than 2 persons, if you agree on everything, it means some people are not thinking. As long as you are thinking, there will be some divergence. But these should not be violent divergences. When they become violent, then it becomes a problem. Let's differ, have different views, but not in a catastrophic manner as to destroy the process itself. We should get to the logical conclusion. So if you listen, you could see that there are some, to me, not many differences. There are not many. I don't think there are more than 10 clauses where there are real substantive differences. There are less than 10 substantive differences. And at the same time, the best way to get these rules is not to say you win and you lose. We've agreed as your leadership, as a bureau, that where we have differences, we want to negotiate first before we put these matters to acrimonious debate. That has not helped us in the past. It has only killed this parliament. Acrimonious debate does not help. So how do we move forward? We thought we would finish this afternoon, have consensus on everything, and from tomorrow, Thursday, the rules committee drafters start drafting, Friday drafting, into the weekends, Sunday, they have translation Monday. That was what we thought. But we need to give room to amicable settlement. So after this stage, immediately from here, we now request the chair of rules and his team to ensure that the consultants that are in here quickly identify all the common clauses and say, on these clauses it's done till everybody agrees. But on these ones, there seems to be a bit of divergence. And we say, on those clauses where there are no differences, please start drafting the final document that will come back to the chamber for adoption clause by clause. Where there are differences, highlight them very quickly. And if it were possible, we would want those translated and sent to all members quickly, so that each member can say, these are the differences in the areas, this is what has been agreed by all caucuses. So that our next stage is to allow, and from now immediately again, we are allowing the caucus chairpersons, and the bureau will advise after this, but at least the caucus chairpersons, the bureau will tell me who do we need people to support the caucus chairpersons to quickly also start negotiating. You should still start negotiating as to where we seem you and me, we differed. With this region and that region, we differed. How can we close? For example, the committees should remain as they are. Can we move to 14? Can we move to 17? Right. Those are not areas where people can have extreme positions about number of committees. We believe people can sit and say, I think, let's do like this. And the other clauses. So negotiations have started now between and among regional caucuses to see that, but when you presented, we are different. And that process will be organized by the Bureau, how they can negotiate, so that we minimize acrimony as we get to agreement. So tomorrow we can't state what time. If it were possible, we'll be advised through messages. If it is possible for the the drafters in committee, those chairmen who are sitting there, to be able to identify all the areas of agreement, areas of disagreement. And caucus is negotiated, we could come with 9, but it may not be possible. So I think as to what time we can regroup, let's look at possibly towards lunch, maybe 11:30, maybe 12, maybe 2, to give time to negotiations. You will all be advised that we are sitting this time. In the meantime, committees, all committees, once we negotiate, committees should go back to work. Tomorrow, Friday, is also committee work. Then we'll tell you when we can reconvene. Committees have business to do because we are planning. We want to have a calendar for 2023, January to December. So each committee has to meet and agree what activities, what program for your committee, what you want to do from January to December 2023. This then will be subjected to some further consolidation at the retreat, which takes place on the 11th, 12th of October by the bureaucracies. But the whole committee has to agree the program for next year, January through to December. So committees have business to do tomorrow. They have business to do on Friday. In the meantime, the other issues of negotiations will be taking place. Mr. Clerk, are you ready for committee rooms or you want to send the messages later? Mr. Clerk, Mr. Gali?
Point of.
Are you ready to announce committee meetings or you want to send the messages?
Sorry, President, point of addition.
Addition, yeah, that is good. Thank you. I'll start from here.
Thank you.
Honorable, then I go to Honorable Mashakada.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want to appreciate the way you've guided us on an entire process of amending these rules. But I'm worried about these negotiations, Mr. President. How about if the people that started the process, the Rules Committee, instead of the chairpersons going into the negotiations, the Rules Committee tomorrow morning invites these chairpersons and the rules, because now the process we started is by the Rules Committee. It would be proper that the Rules Committee complete it by meeting these chairpersons or the bureaus of the caucuses. That's my submission, Mr. President. Thank you.
Every submission is good. Your submission is noted, but you heard I said how I mentioned chairpersons of caucuses as being involved in negotiations. I mentioned the Rules Committee chair, this committee, but I say after this, I think the Bureau will also guide the final structure of negotiations. But I also want to say, if you negotiate as a group of 30, you are bound to succeed much later or to fail. The smaller the negotiating committees, the better you achieve results. This is from experience anywhere in the world. You don't create a negotiating committee of 50 people. It has to be a bit smaller, but representative, first of all the regional caucuses. So it can only be of 2 because we have 5 regional caucuses. So not 2 people, 3 people can negotiate on this. All caucuses have to be represented first. Right. So whether we take the Bureau of the Rules is possible, but I want to prescribe as I stand here. But point noted. Dr. Mashakada, Honorable.
Thank you, President. First of all, I want to thank the chairpersons of regional caucuses for their excellent presentations. I think we must give them another round of applause. By way of suggesting a more systematic and smarter way forward, Mr. President, I suggest that after listening to the 5 presentations, I recommend we proceed as follows. The technical team should now go and do color coding of the issues. By color coding, I mean as follows. All those areas where we have agreed to must now be color coded green and sent immediately for drafting. But you could listen and see other new areas that are not in the rules of procedure at all, new things that are coming up, and those should be classified as amber or yellow. And those issues where there is no agreement, we classify them as red. After that color coding, I propose that regional caucuses be given another second opportunity to revisit what other caucuses presented here, because this is the first time we heard, like from the Southern Caucus, this is the first time we've heard the opinions of other caucuses. So after the color coding, the color coding should be given back to the regional caucuses so that they can have a second bite of the cherry, and then we come back to finalize the documents. That's what I propose, President.
As I said, every contribution is good. This is coming into the leadership of the Bureau. So we now hear the color coding, or hear the rules. Thank you. So tomorrow, I think from the color coding, there's an issue of probably the caucuses taking another bite at 9 and compare as a caucus where you are differing with others. You may actually, as a caucus, say, oh, I think this one we can let go, this one, but on this one, go and negotiate. Look, I think in this forum, we may take another hour. Leave that. As we move out, regional caucus chairpersons join the Bureau. We're going to have, we're going to share some ideas and structure this thing properly. And immediately, communication will go to all of you. But if there will be a change, we'll tell you. Otherwise, ordinarily, we go to our committees, or if we can't, you still be told whether we meet at 9. It's possible. That we can say we come back we meet at 9, you go to your regional caucuses. It's another possibility that we may go. So come to PAP for 9, either you go to committee or you go to plenary. I think I also want to thank all of you. Good presentations. We meet tomorrow. Thank you.
Les annonces, Monsieur le Président. Honorable membre,
Honorable members, I am making an announcement in terms of meeting rooms tomorrow. Tomorrow, 27th of October 2022, the following committees are meeting in the following rooms. The Committee on Rules, Privileges and Discipline will meet in room 1. The Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Settlement Dispute will meet in room 3. The Committee on Gender in Committee Room 2. From 2 to 6 p.m., the Committee on Rules will continue in room 1. The Committee on Health will work in room 2. The Committee on Transport, Communications, Energy, Science and Technology will meet in Committee Room 5. And finally, the Committee on Financial Affairs will meet in Committee Room 3.
to conduct business. Sorry.
Ce sont ces commissions qui se réunissent demain.
The committee is meeting tomorrow. The other committees will continue their meetings on Friday morning and on Friday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. We adjourn.